few months ago, I made a video explaining why I switched from RawTherapee to Darktable. And in the comments, someone suggested to look at a software called Art, which I did. So for those of you who don't know, Art is a fork of RawTherapee and the developers claim they made a few improvements. So in this video, we will see if those improvements makes Art a better solution than RawTherapee, and if so, how does it compare to Darktable. So if that sounds good for you, let's go. The first thing I do when I try a new program is I read the documentation. I know it's weird, but it's very useful. When I look at Art's documentation, I was a little bit concerned. On their website, in the FAQ, they state their goal. The main goal is to have fun developing the application, and the second is to learn about raw processing. At first, this worried me because it suggests this is more like a personal project, and this was confirmed after reading further. The FAQ also mentioned that the project is mostly driven by one person. This means that if that person loses interest, development could stall if no one takes over. And on top of that, when answering the question why should I use Art, they actually suggest you probably shouldn't and recommend alternative including Darktable and RawTherapee. I've heard good things about this project, but reading that got me worried. But as you will see, I was completely wrong. Anyways, I've installed it on my Linux machine. So if you want to try that software for yourself but you are not running Linux, you have two options. The first and obvious solution is to install Linux. If that's not for you, it's also available on macOS and Windows. On my Linux system, I use Arch, so it was available on the AUR. But on most Linux distributions, the simplest solution is to install it as a Flatpak. The first thing you will realize after launching the application is that it looks very similar to RawTherapee. So if you are familiar with RawTherapee, you will feel right at home as the differences aren't obvious. But as you start exploring, you realize there are a few key differences. For instance, the website highlights improvement to the UI to make it more user-friendly. For example, in RawTherapee, the saturation slider is placed within the exposure module, which doesn't make much sense. But in Art, they fix that by placing it in the color tab next to vibrance. And as you explore the menus, you will find several changes like this. The next big difference in my opinion is the local editing module. So I believe Art made their version much before RawTherapee and the implementation is completely different. But I've heard that it's much easier to create masks with Art. But the first time I looked at the local editing module in Art, I was disappointed because of the limited number of modules in that section. So if you want to do local editing with a module that isn't in the list, you are stuck. Considering that, the local editing capabilities in RawTherapee seem to be better because even if masks are harder to create, the list of modules you can apply to a mask is very extensive. But as you will see, I was completely wrong. Art claimed they support CTL script, so I didn't know what they were at first, but after reading about it, I realized it was very powerful. So you can import these scripts to the local editing module and they will let you do operations on your photos. The Art GitHub provides a lot of script you can download. For example, a simple one is exposure control. I can import the exposure script to the local editing module and then apply that module to as many masks as I wish. On this picture, for instance, I can darken the sky, darken the foreground, and then increase the exposure in the center of my image. It's not quite good as Darktable because with Darktable you can apply any mask to any module. But these scripts allow you to add custom module to Art and apply the effect to the entire image or to specific masks. And speaking of masking, doing mask in Art is indeed much easier than in RawTherapee. You can draw circle, rectangle, ellipses, graduated filter, and even create custom shapes. On these masks, you can add parametric masking, and that combined with the CTL scripts make the local editing capabilities of Arts a few steps above RawTherapee. I do believe Art is better than RawTherapee, but is it better than Darktable? In the video I made about RawTherapee versus Darktable, I was complaining about a few points. So let's see if Art fixed most of these issues. So the first point was the Lua script module, which allows us to interact with external applications. That makes Darktable very powerful, and as an example, we can do HDR and focus stacking inside Darktable just because of the Lua script module. Art has the CTL script, but these scripts will operate on the picture only. But Art also has something called user commands. This feature allows you to run script from your OS on Art. For example, you can add a user command that will run a bash script that will merge your photos using HDR merge. This is a great feature, and it means that like Darktable, we can do HDR and focus stacking with Art. But this feature is not as user-friendly as with Darktable, and also the list of plugins available is not that long. Next, the second reason I like Darktable better is the snapshot. So when using RawTherapee, snapshots aren't safe, so you are not able to use snapshot to create many versions of the same picture. Art fixed this issue as it's able to save snapshots. So when you want to do many versions of the same picture, it's very easy. But one complaint I had about RawTherapee that Art didn't fix is that the history isn't saved. So if you close your editor and come back later, the history won't be saved and you will have to look at each individual modules to see the change you made. The last point I made in the other video was the geotagging feature. Darktable has built-in geotagging capabilities. You can drag and drop your picture on the Mac to geotag them or manually tag your photo with GPX files. Art doesn't have built-in geotagging capabilities, so you will have to use third-party application for geotagging. So in my opinion, Art is probably a better software than RawTherapee. So if your workflow rely on local editing, you will find that Art is much more powerful. Also, if you rely on HDR and focus stacking, both techniques can be done easily with Art. My only concern about Art is the project size. If you look at the GitHub, there are 3 contributors, and one of them is doing almost all of the commits. The modifications this guy made to RawTherapee are amazing, but this means if he doesn't want to continue, the project may stop. Maybe someone will take over, but we never know. Finally, will I switch from Darktable to Art? The short answer is no, and there are a few reasons for that. Even if we can do HDR and focus stacking with Art, it's not as user-friendly as with Darktable. You have to configure everything in the script, while with Darktable, parameters can be set in the UI. Also, local editing is much better in Art compared with RawTherapee, but I still think Darktable is better. With Darktable, you can apply mask to any module, but with Art, you need to tinker with script to add module to the local editor. Overall, Art is a great software, and if you are using RawTherapee, I suggest you take a look. But for my personal needs, Darktable is still the better option. So I hope this video was helpful. If it was, just give me a like, and see you next time.